Hello, everybody. Welcome. Dr. Lynn and I are here to speak about a topic that's very near and dear to our heart. We're going to be discussing the introduction to the Fire Horse Year, which is the Chinese New Year. We've both been contemplating for a very long time how this year was going to go, especially since the snake year rattled us, unintended. So I think with all that being said, let's review what the snake year was like, maybe for us personally, that we can go over into some details on a good overview.
Yeah, let's jump into it. Something that I heard recently about the snake year, I was told that if a snake doesn't shed its skin, it will die. And that really struck a chord in me. And I was like, wow, I mean, this is all happening for a reason. This is all happening for a greater movement, evolution, revolution, however way you want to put it. But all of the things that come up for us, especially during these really intense years, I mean, this was a wood snake year, meaning wood is a very intense element and energy in general. The snake year was so much about really seeing honest mirrors and really seeing parts of myself that needed to come to the surface. And when I think about snake energy, it makes me feel like it goes into those deep, dark, obscure places. And that's really, it felt like shadow work, a year of a lot of shadow work, a year, a lot of facing honest truths and seeing mirrors. But also at the same time, there was a lot of liberation in that. There was a lot of moments of me feeling happiness and feeling, well, this is real. This is the authenticity. This is the truth behind what I want and what I desire and all of the things. When I also think about snake energy, it reminds me of sacral energy and serpent energy. And that reminds me of sexuality. It reminds me of desire. It reminds me of and the rawness of emotions. And I really think that this last cycle and this last year of the snake year really taught me how to get really raw and tender and how to just hold all of those emotions. I really up leveled when it came to emotional intelligence and holding that in myself big time because there was really big mirrors in my relationship, in my work, in myself that presented me all of those opportunities to up level and get connected to my body's wisdom. I'm curious about how it was for you. How was snake year for you? What came up?
No, it's definitely one of those years that was now retrospectively that's coming to an end has probably been the most transformative I've had in probably my adult life, which is a big statement to make.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that was frustrating with the year, which I know that most of us are probably feeling, is that steak has this symbolism of shedding a skin and transforming. But it
Mm.
seemed like this year was like you'd shed a skin, you transform, you'd heal, then you'd be like, oh wait, there's another layer. I
Another
have to shed
layer.
again. I have to do it again. And it seems like this perpetual cycle of continually having to do that. And I think from a Western astrological perspective, this felt like a very scorpionic year, like
Yeah.
Scorpio, because they have a lot of similar symbolism of death transformation, but also this sexuality aspect that you did speak of. And it's been a year for me of knowing what it means to be a sexually sovereign being, knowing what it means to express myself, my sexual orientation, and things along those lines. Because I'm going from a more rural conservative area to an area that's more urban and open, and having to really play it. Oh, I guess I didn't realize how much I held those parts back in myself just due to the outward reflection of the area that I was in. There's a lot of those themes coming up for me as well, which was incredibly interesting. And
Yeah.
snake symbolism has always been about secrets. And for me, I don't think that any personal life secrets came up, but it was more so the opposites of secrets, which is truth. And I feel like I had to be so honest and so truthful and finally really express that part of myself. Otherwise, I wasn't really going to make it through this year. And I think that that statement is a really good metaphor, just kind of speaking of the snake year as a whole, taking away from personal experiences that you look at the symbolism, even biblical references of the snake bringing the bringer of secrets, the bringer of knowledge, the bringers of truth. Then you look at something Harry Potter reference, the Chamber of Secrets, the snake being about kept secrets, darkness, hidden truths. It's
Mhm.
something that we've seen in so many areas politically, socially, economically this last year. There has been some very dark secrets coming out of the depths. And it's just such a huge coincidence that this is the symbolism of this year. It's a purging of all of these hidden truths and hidden knowledge and being forced to look at it, which also is again very scorpionic as well. And with this force of us looking at it, realizing that we do not want to go down this path ever again. We want to bring everything to the surface and we want transformation from those secrets as well. Like we want change from what we learned through that. And I think it's paired very well with wood because wood is all about the liver system. It's
Yeah.
about detox. It's about purging. It's about getting rid of. It's about growth. So I feel like the wood and snake are saying the exact same thing. And I think
Yeah.
that we're finally at a point that we've dealt with so much baggage, so much transformation, so many secrets. And I think the reason why this was such a necessary part, which I had discussed with you earlier, is that the good news, everyone, good news is coming. Horse year is supposed to be very, very different from that. And I think the reason why that is because the fire horse energy is so go, go, go. It's so instantaneous. It's so manifestation that if we didn't go through these trials and tribulations, we might not know how to work with that energy because now we know what we want. We know what change we want to see. We know where we want to go. And the last thing I'll say before passing it back to you, because you're the expert on this topic, is a snake year is yin. And I think that's another reason why I grappled with it the way that I did is I don't like yin. I don't like stillness. I don't like slowing down. I don't like retrospection. And I was forced to do all of those things this year. So that's another aspect to touch base on that the snake is a yin animal. And I think we saw the yang within the yin, but it was still a yin type of year, if that
Yeah.
resonates.
It does, and it reminds me of there's so many different avenues to go here. You know, if you think back the year before Snake Year, and I know this is a topic that you want to touch on, which is the Yang Dragon Year. That was an incredibly intense year, and especially because it was Yang, it was more outwards. It was like things were happening in the world. There was a lot of shifting. There was a lot of conflict, war. All of these things are being presented to us in the external world. Whereas I felt like the yin, as we shifted more into yin snake, it felt more of like an inward alchemical process, like that sort of inward conflict that we kind of present with when we're met with like honesty and transparency and like mirrors and like the shadows and these deep truths that we're here to accept about the world and about ourselves. And there was a lot of that, I think, this year of sort of like going into the depths and seeing all the muck and like being able to sit in the muck and being able to sit with the mud in order for the lotus to come. And I think there was a lot of revolutions of that. And I think with yin
Mhm.
energy in particular, it is about the dark. It is about the nighttime. It is about the 12 a.m. time where like, there is a lot of chemical changing happening within the body. There's repair, there's death, there's dying, there's all sorts of things happening in that space. And there was themes also of us getting more comfortable with those themes of mortality, death, rebirth, all of those things in order to sort of prepare us and to prepare the soil for this next year, this fire horse year. One other thing that came up as you were speaking was snakes inherently are low to the ground, whereas the dragon is this mythical creature that flies and it has a really big energy to it. Whereas snakes also have sort of that big energy, right? But it's more of in a contained way. And they also stay really low to the ground. Their bodies are connected to the earth. So there was so much around learning about how to be in conversation and deep relationship with our own bodies this year. I don't know if it was like that for you, but I know for me, there was a lot of learning about trauma, learning about somatic awareness. Of course, I'm so fascinated and passionate about that. But I mean, it can go into avenues of dance and singing and how do we express the energies through our body, through our these different energetic channels that we all have, whether it's creativity, um, yeah, movement. Like there's so many different ways that I think the snake's energy and that yin energy wants to and has expressed itself. I wonder if there's anything that sort of sparked you there.
To dovetail off your, retrospective of 2024, which was a dragon year, and I think the best mythological structure for that year would have been if you think of a dragon coming into a town or a village and kind of burning it down, saying apolitical in the statement. We still did see in 2024 just so much destruction and breaking down of systems by very strong, powerful forces. That was how that mirrored to the microcosmic and the personal was seeing the destruction, the chaos that was going on the outside. By the time we processed that in 2024, it did transition into the snake year, which is all about introspection. And I think it's because we're seeing so much chaos that the only
Mhm.
way we can go is to go within. And those who didn't decide to go within, I think that's why they went into so much panic, into so much fear and so much chaos, which a lot of people are still feeling. And so the solution to that is to go inward and be able to address the outward by going inward, since we have been addressed with so much energy, so much emotion, and things along those lines. And I think
Right.
when we transition to 2025, and speaking of the snake and everything you discussed there, it's like this yin snake energy is kind of all about integrating our energy and working with it. I think very interestingly to because all these animals, it's the symbolism of them that which gives us the lore and the stories. And if we look into like Celtic or Norse region, these snakes were said to be the indigenous people. If we looked at areas of the Americas, snakes are often associated with the indigenous people. You look at Africa, Middle East, it's very indigenous knowledge, indigenous lore. And I think that the snake here was a symbolism of returning to our roots, returning to these practices. And for those of us that were able to actually do that, being able to liberate them in some ways. And I
Mhm.
think that that was another really good message of the snake year is
Yeah.
learning to work with these subtle energies. Cause I mean, you even look at symbolisms like Kundalini associated with the snake or the
Mhm.
medical symbol of the caduceus associated with the snake. All of those
Yep.
systems are talking about working with these subtle energies in our bodies for
Right.
almost a form of self empowerment. And I think, again, the reason why that snake year introspection was so important is because where we're about to go in the fire horse year.
Yeah, what's interesting, my last thing on snake year here is when I think about a snake, I think about it coiling, and that coiling almost being like an identity that we've held. And then what does the snake do? It uncoils and it unravels. And so a lot of, I think this year was unraveling, structures and systems and identities that we've held on to and reworking, reliving, kind of like imagining another way. And then the other last thing here is in Chinese medicine and herbalism that we actually use the snake. There's some, I used to
Mm.
grow up and I remember some of my ancestors and some of my aunts and uncles would laugh and they would bring these big bottles of snake wine and it was like literally snakes inside wine. And this is actually a very common thing in Asia for them to eat snake, to work with snake as snake medicine, to make herbs from snake, herbal decoctions, and to take snake wine and things like those things. But if you think about what it's doing from just a therapeutic medicinal perspective, it's actually detoxing your body from toxins, from poisons. It's a really interesting way that we can learn so much from just the snake itself, the symbolism and also its own way of living and its biology and what it does to our bodies when we actually in a relationship with the snake. So it's interesting. I think this snake year has really prepared us for this next year. And I'm curious if you want to just dive into this next year and just like really start going into what you feel with this fire horse year.
The most appropriate thing to do is to do a quick glimpse to the past.
Yep.
And this isn't something I actually told you in our preludes. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about this
Mm-hmm.
because the last fire horse year was actually 1966 because they repeat every 60 years. And when we had the last fire horse year, you actually saw dramatic birth rate drops in Asia, specifically Japan, but a little bit in China. And the
Yeah.
reason is the lore said that if you had a woman, a child birth during that year, they were going to be too rebellious and disruptive to the system.
Mhm.
So it's just incredibly curious that that was the feeling of the time, that we actually didn't want that type of energy. We didn't want rebellion. We didn't want transformation. We didn't want divine feminine change.
Mhm.
So I think that that part alone, looking back at 1966, was the last time we saw this energy and how much it was trying to be controlled and contained. And then you look to the Americas during that time. I want to say that was a Vietnam War-ish time. So that was a time when there was protests going on. We're getting close to like movements of peace, love, liberation, and all of these things happening during that time. So it's so interesting that we can see those echoes to the time we're in right now. And before I go any further into my discussion about the fire horse year for 2026, I'm curious how any of the 1966 might have resonated with you.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned this, and it's so fascinating. I am such a music documentary nerd that I was at a point just watching music documentaries all about any music that was created in like the 1960s all the way into like 1979. I was just so fascinated with the music at that time because it was extremely political. And if you think about it, in between that time, there was, yeah, the beginnings of Vietnam War, the communists that were coming into Vietnam during that time, and they're creating a lot of conflict and just sort of disruption in the society at that time. There was a lot of different things happening during that time, protests, people standing up. I do feel there was also the liberation movement. There was people who were like, it reminds me of Woodstock, you know,
I was just gonna say Woodstock was
right?
1969. So yeah, that
Yes.
that era, that period. Yeah.
Thinking of that, people's liberation movement of expanding themselves. And there was, I just remember so many themes of expanding the use of acid during that time, even the
Yeah.
studies of acid during that time, LSD. I think there was a lot around the expansion of human consciousness during that time, but also a lot of social, political, cultural movements and protest as well. People wanting to speak up, people initiating projects, people initiating movements, grassroots movements, all of those things were happening. And I think music as a vehicle for all of those things, for the movements, was was really key. I mean, I think about Bob Marley as well. His music
Mhm.
was really, really influential during that time as well. Here's this person speaking about peace and love, and can we meet our neighbors, and can we not listen to the corruption that's happening? And it was like, there's so much there. And I feel we can learn from that because the time that we're entering in and that we're in right now is really like, is we're continuing that. And we're
Yeah.
going to see themes of that. Really, like people stepping up, people feeling the urge to use their voice, to create. I remember reading about Saturn and Aries. Saturn's are going to, and from Western astrology, Saturn's going to enter into Aries in the beginning. It's very similar time to the fire horse year. And that was an incredibly creative time, creative renaissance. People had new ideas, people had new creative visions and wanted to initiate that. Aries to me is the fire of an really is the fire of initiation. It's the spark. It's the pioneer energy. It totally coincides with the fire horse year.
No, I couldn't agree more to that. And I will, to dovetail a few of the topics you brought up, we
Mhm.
talked about how in the 60s it was very much so this liberation of consciousness, through some mechanisms of things like psilocybin, LSD, and things like that.
Yeah.
And you do see right now a lot of centers and places even researching the medicinal use of mushrooms, medicinal use of psychoactive properties in a more ceremonial way, but also for treatment of things like Alzheimer's, dementia, PTSD. So you are seeing some of those things shadow and echo. And so that was the last time we were in a fire horse year. That was 1966. And
Yeah.
then moving up to the last horse year, which wasn't a fire horse year, but it was the last horse year. We're in 2014 now. And in 2014, because you brought music, I'm just going to give you some fun facts. In 2014, the top three songs were Shake It Off by Taylor Swift, Happy by Pharrell, and Fancy by Iggy Azalea. So I
Mhm.
feel like it was very much a time of like very, very positive messages. A lot of those songs may have annoyed the hell of you by the time 2014 was over, but they were very, very like happy, positive, literally happy, positive, moving forward type of things. And another two things that was big in 2014 that I think just wraps our idea around just minute details that might have happened. It was actually when Frozen was out. So that was when Frozen was released, which I do think was, again, you might have got annoyed with it by the end of 2014, but I also feel like was a very liberating time and a very like just light time in a positive way. And it was also the peak of the ice bucket challenge, which again was a kind of cool cultural thing that we were doing to raise money. But although most people were just doing it for fun, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I think again, taking back to the notes again, just always looking into the past to inform what the future might have for us. I will say for me personally, 2014 was actually the year I decided to go into the career path of where I'm at today. And so it's very interesting that that's the year when I started this path and how I see that repeating itself coming into this new year. I'm in a new city. I'm reestablishing my practice. I'm reestablishing how I do business and how I work as a practitioner. So I do see that higher echo of 2014 coming into play for me. So I think for everyone, it's a really good introspective or journaling activity to look at your photos from 2014, look at what you may have been doing at that time, and do understand that this is going to be a hopefully higher version of whatever 2014 was for you.
Mhm.
Before going on to actual 2026 Fire Horse year, do you have
Yeah.
anything to insight on 2014?
Yeah, when I was taking time to think about 2014, I thought about how I was moving to a completely different place. It was really the energy of new beginnings. I was starting my path of healthcare and going into pre-nursing school at the time. Like that's what I thought I wanted to do. And I always knew I wanted to help people and be of service, but I just didn't know. And this, I guess, is another way to talk about fire element energy because I felt my spark was very misguided. And
Mhm.
so I feel in this moment, I'm way more conscious of where is that spark? What brings me joy? And how is that aligned to what I want to create? How is it aligned to what I want to do? Can I not light many fires just so because the fires can be lit, but really
Yeah.
light the fires that are aligned and have a lot of discernment? Because I think with this year, what I'm getting a sense of, we can totally dive into this. And I
Yeah.
also think what Snake Year taught me was so much discernment, so much of where do we put our energy and how do we expend and use that energy and when is it necessary to contract. And so I'm curious, let's continue going into the Fire Horse year. What does it mean for you? What stands out to you about the Fire Horse year?
I think the biggest lesson that I know me as a person is going to have to learn as well, and
Yeah.
speaking to what you just stated there, is that the positive aspect of the fire horse here is we are going to have so much young. We have fire as an element already being young, horse as an animal being young, and it's this buildup of energy that all of us are feeling right now. So we're going to have so much energy behind what we're putting. But the caution there is, though, therefore, we have to force moments of yin. And what I mean by that is that we do need to rest. We do need to use discernment. We need to make sure we're not spreading our energy in way too many directions because that can easily happen. So that's the thing that for me, I know that is the lesson I have to put in place. I want to make sure my routines are
Mhm.
in place, my sleep schedule is in place, my book time to do nothing or meditate is actually there because once the fire horse year comes,
Gonna
it's gonna be
come.
very hard to tame. It's gonna
Yeah.
be very, very hard to tame. So I think that making sure we have those in place now. And I think that the other aspect of the fire element itself that I think is something that we should elaborate on is the fire element in Chinese medicine, primarily the initial organ system we related to is the heart. And the heart is all about passion guiding us, joy guiding us, our heart's desires guiding us.
Mm.
And again, I think that's why we had to go through this wood snake year to determine what our passions or desires are because there's so much noise right now. There's so much input. There is so much going on. It's hard to discern what is ours or what is external output. So we did need to go in to determine how we want to put this energy forward because
Yeah.
I think the key phrase of 2026 is going to be careful what you wish for. And I mean that benevolently and negatively. And benevolently, I mean, whatever you wish for will probably appear just like that. But there's also the question is that what you want? And so that's, I think, the very important piece to be keeping an eye on as we kind of do move into this next year.
I love that. It just screams to me discernment. Really have clarity around, is this lying to me? Is this of service to me? Like, do I how can I contain the fire? Right? We don't want a wildfire. We don't want like a fire that's beyond our control. We want a fire that is contained. We want a fire that's held with our systems, with structures, with that kind of earth element supporting it. So, to kind of backtrack here, when I think about the fire horse year, I think about how it's a yang year. And you showed me this chart earlier of how each year flips, right? We were just in the yin snake year and now we're in the yang. We're going to enter into the yang horse year. So I think that alone can just tell us a lot, just like the difference of energies. You mentioned that there's a lot of yang energy this year, so it's really important to anchor into yin. Like, yin is our devotional practice this year. It is really like, can we prioritize yin in the midst of all the yang that's going to happen? That yin is actually going to fuel and give nutrients to the soil that's going to allow us to show up in our lives, do what we want, create the movements that we want, show up in our work. Like, yin is the basis. It's the substance that we are operating from. So it's going to be really important to honor yin. And how do we honor yin? We honor it with structure. We honor it with prioritizing it, scheduling it into our daily life, even if it's 5 minutes, even if it's 15 minutes, even if it's like, I am going to just shut my eyes and just meditate or put on my favorite song or light some candles and turn off my phone. That sometimes is enough to bring in little drops of yin in your life. I know I went on a little tangent there because I got so excited. I love talking about yin. But my other thing here is talking about the fire element energy because it is a fire horse year. Let's just talk about fire element. I mean, you mentioned the heart and it connecting to this sense of connection, to people, to joy, what our heart's desire is. And what I'm sensing is there is going to be new pathways of showing up. There's going to be new ideas and creativity, similar to like these songs that you mentioned from 2014. Like, these were things that were coming from the heart. That's why it resonated with so many people on such a grand level, because it was heart medicine. It was speaking from the heart. And so if we can channel what we're creating in our business and how we're speaking, how we're talking through our heart versus from only our mind or from like fear, that's like a whole different energy. So to me, when I think about the heart and the fire element of this year, I think about that. It's like, how can we move forward and initiate and create what we want to create and move? Fire horse to me feels like moving fast, quick decisions, right? It can be almost like an impulsive energy to it because there is also a shadow aspect of fire. It's when it's uncontrolled, it's impulsive, it's just doing things not aligned to the heart. It's not having discernment. And I keep talking about discernment, and it makes sense now because the other side of the heart organ, because each organ has a yin and yang pair, the other side of that is the small intestine. The small intestine in Chinese medicine is all about discernment. It's all about really looking at your cards and saying, okay, what is actually serving me here and what can I keep for nourishment and that is helpful, and what can I release with a lot of love and to clear from my system, and allowing that continual cycle of taking in and release to happen. Anything that comes up for you from all of
Yeah,
this?
something that you made me think of, which I'm so happy just came to my brain, is that so
Yeah.
this the last years we were in were what years, right? That's 2024
Mhm.
and 2025. And when we look at the Chinese medicine calendar or clock, we each element is associated with a season. And
Mhm.
so I was just going back in my brain as we were talking there and taking some pieces away. How interesting is it that 2020 would have been a metal year, actually? So we know that metal is all about fall, it's all about death, it's all about the breakdown of things, it's all about grief, it's all about all those things. And we saw that through 2020 and 2021. Then we moved
Yeah.
into water years, 2022 and 2023. That's the winter, if you will. Those were some
Mhm.
pretty dark and cold times, for lack of better terminology and words. And these last 2 years we had of 2024 and 2025 would have been wood years, which is seen as spring. And it really does feel like there was what spring is all about. There was growth, but then there was thunderstorms, there was rain, there was water, there was mud, there was a little bit of everything going on there, ultimately for growth to come out of that. And so I think the really, really positive thing for the most part, everyone loves summer, and being a summer baby, I have to state that we're entering into summer, that's what is coming right now. And that's why you do have to use some discernment with your energy, because summers can easily be a time of burnout. But I think that's a really good way conceptually to see how these last years have tracked, is by using the calendar and using the energies of what those seasons are, that we really are entering the beginning of the summer phase, where we're actually going to see all this abundance, things blossoming, things coming to
Mhm.
fruition. And I think that it's also the benevolence of summer, in which we all have reminiscent memories of. And if we can kind of hold that truth and try to stay away from the more negative potential timelines, which are always there, that I think that 2026 and 2027 can be really benevolent if we can get through this growing pain of the spring here.
Mhm. Yeah, I one thing I want to emphasize with that is really leaning into the heart, and that, do what feels good for you, do what feels pleasurable, do what feels joyful. I mean, part of yin, anchoring in to yin as a devotional practice, is coming back to what do you desire deeply on
Mm.
that heart level. And I think there's so much medicine there for all of us. I know for me for sure. And the other side that I think about this is I think about the pericardium, which is the heart's protector. The pericardium is this tissue that sits over the heart, that protects the heart like a bag. And we biologically have it to protect us, but energetically we have it almost as like a gate that opens and closes. And what I'm seeing now more is that we actually have, I know myself included, often have this energetic gate closed too tightly. It's because there's so much going on. Maybe even our past was difficult. Maybe even we have difficult relationships now that we've built this sort of wall of protection around the heart. And I find that we're going to be presented with that. Can we connect in a way that feels supportive? Can we be able to express from our heart what we need to say without feeling, I have to distance, or I have to be, all of these things? I think it's going to take us into a totally new consciousness and way of thinking and way of relating to each other. And so I'm really excited to see that. I love that you named the summer energy here too, because I'm a summer baby, I'm a Leo, and just I think about the joy and the sun and how that actually gives nourishment to the world. But also there's a limit to that, right? There's a boundary to that. Like the sun is not always shining all the time. The sun sets and nighttime comes, yin comes. And so we also need those times, especially during this fire horse year of like the sun setting and us going into our own, our yin times. And those times can be small moments throughout your day that I think might be really supportive. How about the horse symbol? How does the horse energy feel to you, Jordan?
Yeah, I think it's one of those that can be interpreted in so many ways. And I think that we all have a pretty good basis, though. I think if we look at just, Western culture and stuff, I mean, horses were used for either transportation, they were used for a form of bringing goods from one place to another. Then we also more modernly have horse racing. So,
Yeah.
horse has always been a symbolism of productivity, moving something forward, getting something done. And I think that that's going to be a huge theme again of what this entire picture is supposed to look like. And I had a peer to me also bring up something that I've never personally ridden a horse, but they always say that when you are horseback riding, you have to have really yin energy. You have to be calm, controlled, in a peaceful state. Otherwise, the horse senses that you're a little erratic, then it gets a little erratic, and the ride does not go smoothly. And so I think that's a great symbolism of us needing to contain and utilize our yin to get into these spaces in order to take off, is that we do need to use some discernment when utilizing this horse energy, because it can get chaotic if we don't allow that. And
Mhm.
I I don't want to focus on this too long, but we do also need to discuss the fact that there are some horse symbolisms surrounding war. So this can be energy if we don't manage it, if we don't manage and shift correctly, that can drum up these feelings of being the aggressor, these feelings of conflict. And that's the other side of joy summer energy. I point out the statistic that during the summertime is when there's the most crime. It's because this joy and amped up energy can sometimes, if it overwhelms us and we don't channel it correctly, it can lead to conflict. So that is why there is this kind of need to utilize this horse energy that is coming up in a way in which we balance it with yin. And I think that that's just also speaking to the element as well. For you, I'm curious if you were to just, if someone, like, let's say you're having a session and someone like saw a horse in their periphery or was thinking, like, "Oh, what does this horse symbolism mean in my dream?" How would you interpret just horse itself? What would your go to be?
Mm. Yeah, such a great question. For me, when I feel into the horse energy, I think of horses running, like a beautiful scene of horses running and just like
Mm,
that sort of liberated energy. And you think about that freedom, that liberation, that like ability to move and travel and that energy of expansion. Really to me it feels like expansion. And as you were speaking about the summertime energy, it reminded me that when we come back to and look at just the cycles of our menstrual cycle, of our womb cycle, this time is almost analogous to ovulation time, which is where the hormones are the highest, where
okay.
we're
I was
like the
actually going to
most
ask, I wasn't
yeah.
sure what fire was associated with.
Yeah, when we're like the most fertile, like that is the time where it's the window of fertility. I mean, this is a time where I think the fire energy, the horse energy can be really constructive towards what our heart's desire is, to what we want to build. And I think similar to having a wild horse versus a tamed horse that like trains and does these races and does these things. It's trained. It's really highly trained probably all the time, right? It's really well taken care of. It probably has the best care and quality of care versus a wild horse maybe is a little more unruly, a little bit more reckless. And so I think we can learn from that in that if we can find our own rhythm and our own balance with this horse energy and not come to it with just unruly and just like, "Hey, let's just see where it takes me," but come into it with some structure, some routine, some systems, some vision for ourselves, some discernment of what we want this year to look like for ourselves. I think that can be the best way to channel this horse energy.
I think that's beautiful that you say to that too, because coming from a chiropractic and acupuncture background, trained horses have the best healthcare of any human on the earth. Honestly, they're getting chiro, they're getting acu, they have dietitians. Like, it's insane the amount of energy that goes into these horses that are doing things like that. And I
Yeah.
think that that's such a good message of how we should treat ourselves this upcoming year, because we are going to have all this energy. We want to make sure we're getting our rest, we're getting our acu and chiro, we're getting all this self care in, and we're taking care of our bodies, because that's the only way this energy is not going to lead to burnout.
Yeah.
Just plainly said.
The thing I wanna say about rest here is I was listening to a podcast about the quality of rest, the restoration what is it? The restoration measurement. And so to me, we can quantify how much rest we're getting, but sometimes that's almost checking off something on a list. And
Mhm.
we're not really getting deep rest. To me, I want to almost discern what is the quality of rest we're getting. If we can have 5 minutes of really deep meditation for 5 minutes versus 30 minutes of just slightly being on your phone, slightly having TV in the background, but closing your eyes, I think that, of course, all rest is, rest, but I think there's a difference. There's a discernment between a quality of rest. How can we feel what is the best support that we need in that time? That's another thing that's coming to me because,
Yeah.
again, with the horse analogy and like giving care to the horse. Okay, well, what does the horse really need? Okay, it needs a chiropractor. It needs that really specific form of care and quality of care, maybe versus something else. And so, how can we start getting more refined with our wellness routines and our quality of care? I think that could also be really supportive for us this year.
No, I agree completely. And I think a great place to take this is just reiterate how many systems are kind of saying the same thing this time of year.
Yeah.
And to give everyone hope, if 2026 hasn't been your jam, do remember that in almost every other system, this year hasn't started yet. So there's still hope for it to come. Again, the Lunar New Year not being till February 17th. The astrological year doesn't start till March. A lot of these bank transits aren't until February, March's time. So we
Yeah.
still there's still hope for us that great change is coming. And to
Mhm.
speak to that, another thing is numerologically, this year is raining the exact same things, which I think it's just so beautiful that these things are coming. Last year was a 9 year, which is very snake transformative, endings beginning, and this year being a 1 year. So it's being new beginnings, new ventures, new things coming about. So
Yeah.
I think numerology is like re speaking these same things. And then a few days after the Chinese New Year, we are also having these transits of Neptune and Saturn entering the 0 degrees of Aries, which is again the
Mhm.
beginning of the zodiac. So I think that we're having screams of new beginnings, new beginnings, new beginnings. And for me personally, I'm going to say I'll love and light on this one. This Neptune and Saturn at 0 degrees of Aries. I think because I don't know if you've heard this, we have not been able, even utilizing AI, to determine if this has ever actually happened ever. Like we have not been able to find if Neptune and Saturn have gone to 0 degrees of Aries together, literally ever. So what I'm going to take with that is I don't care what past Neptune Aries transit look like, Saturn Aries transit looks like, or conjunctions have looked like. This is going to be something we've never seen before. And I think that that means we have the ability to co create it to be something incredibly benevolent. I mean, Neptune having such opposition to Saturn, and usually Neptune and Saturn meaning dissolution of systems, dissolution of power structures. I'm going to hope that that dissolution means in the most peaceful, rapid, way possible, and that's how I'm going to interpret. I'm curious if you have any Neptune Saturn conjunction thoughts though.
Yeah, I'm excited. To me, it really feels like a 0 point of a reset. I think of Neptune as a very spiritual energy. It's a very otherworldly energy. It reminds me of sort of other energies that are available to us. And I think it's going to be a reset to what we've thought in a new way of thinking, a new consciousness. And that's really exciting, especially with the Saturn meeting it there. Saturn is really about reality and what's real, what's there to learn. And I think because those two are meeting at that time, I think Saturn itself too is okay. There's a new wave. There's a new way coming through. So that's what's coming to me. And I think this might be a good time for us to actually share some practical rituals, tools, things that people can do during this time, maybe a little bit before Fire Horse year, even after. Anything that comes to you that you'd like to share.
Yes, very first quick practical thing, just in case we don't mention in the
Yeah.
Chinese system, it is said to be good luck to wear red on the Chinese New Year. So throwing that out there to be your first practical tip. But for me, I think that the most important things here are really being conscious. And this is speaking to myself as well, being conscious because we're talking about rest. We're talking about supporting yin, being really conscious of things that are overly stimulating you. So being conscious of your caffeine routine, being conscious of your stimulants that you're utilizing, being conscious of the media that you're inputting. Those are all very, very stimulating things because we can add yin and pour yin into the system and add rest. And that can only do so much if we're not removing some yang, if we're not taking
Right.
some steps back. And I think that's a really, really important practical step that I would recommend taking, just sharing some biomedical stuff just about caffeine and things that you are stimulating. There's been so much research being done that you really want to keep your caffeine input between a 3 hour window, and you want that window to not go into the PM. And one of the biggest reasons that that is the case is that caffeine releases stimulatory hormones, including catecholamines. And these things cannot be broken down until caffeine is cleared. So if you are constantly hitting the caffeine button, you never clear your stress hormones from your system. So you're never actually reaching true rest. You're never actually entering into yin. So you're just perpetuating this cycle. So that's why they say to keep caffeine intake, if you're going to have to do it, just to the AM time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will never reach a point of reset. And I'll be the first one to admit I'm not giving up my caffeine in 2026, but I'm going to be smart with my caffeine in 2026. So those are my practical tips. And I love to hear from you because I love a lot of your yin advice. I love how I gave yin advice from a yang perspective, but here we are.
Well, I mean, I think what's important, you highlighted what I wanted to say is, we can think about yin and yang as this relationship and they are interconnected to each other. So when yang is like excess yang, when there's too much yang, that means yin will actually get weaker. Its level will get weaker. And so right now we're seeing quite a large prevalence and experience of hyper yang, excess yang in our bodies and our systems. How I see this playing out as people are stuck in their minds. You know how many times I find and I sit with clients and they're just thinking, they're ruminating, they're in their mind and they're disconnected from their body. This is one thing that I always kind of bring people back to is, can you start to feel your feet on the ground? Can you feel the coolness? Even working with simple temperature medicine, like, move away from heat as something, like move more closer to coolness, feeling the coolness on your skin, feeling your feet on the ground, directly on the ground, I think could be one way to pull us back into our feet, pull us back into our bodies, and less into the thinking and more into the body and the sensing. I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm sensing. And also to channel this fire energy, channel the fire energy, channel the horse energy with your systems and structures and routines, but also with your creative rituals. I think this time right now is such a fertile time of creation because Saturn and Neptune are going to zero. That's also happening on an individual level. We are all meeting that as well within ourselves, that 0 point. And I think at that 0 point, there's new beginnings, there's creativity, there's things initiating. So channel that fire energy with your creative rituals, whether that looks like singing, dancing, trying out new hobbies and things that are exciting to you. They're actually finding that we actually become more productive when we're creative. When we've had a creative hobby and we've done that for, I believe they've done a study, if you do 2 hours of something creative every week, that actually makes you more productive and more inspired to show up for your work. That's
That's
just one
huge.
thing. I think if we channel our creativity and channel our heart in that, I think a lot of medicine can come through. So that's what I want to share.
So I'm actually super happy to share one other piece of advice. It's actually coming in directly from you in the past. We were together, I think, when we were in Acu school. I don't know how I forget that cacao is a bitter and it's a very like a heart opener and activator. So I think cacao as a medicinal is perfect for the fire horse year, working with it, of course, in low sugar content, just putting that one out there because it does drain the fire from the heart, but also get us heart centered. And I think that's a beautiful medicine to learn from. And it's a relatively safe medicinal to work with. So if I was going to attack things from that perspective, I think cacao would be a beautiful thing to work with. I know that with TCM herbs, I always like someone to see a practitioner provider before working with any, but is there any TCM herb, single herb that might be coming to mind? Take a second to think about that because I'm going to, this is mine on you. And you can steal it if this is the only one that comes to mind for you. I think 2026 Fire Horse is a really good Wu Wei year because it's connecting the heart and the kidneys. It's very much so an adaptogen. It's cooling. It seems like a very appropriate herb to kind of regulate what comes up for what we're going to experience. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
My thoughts, I think about flowers. I think about tea, like green
Um,
teas, like a green tea that's bitter, that's green and, that green color as well. It's connected to the liver, but it's clearing heat, similar to cacao. So that's mine. I'm always working with green tea all the time. I mean, it's just one of the best herbs to me. So that
have you ever worked with rose? I'm curious.
love rose too. Yeah, I think rose
Do,
would be a
do,
really great one.
Does that have a somewhat of a hardish thing? I'm just assuming. I've actually never worked with it, so I was just
Yeah,
curious.
rose definitely does. It definitely is a heart opener. It's also a detoxing herb as well, and it gently moves liver qi. So Using rosebud tea can be really wonderful. I also think about jasmine tea could be really great as well
Mm.
for helping to just calm the spirits, clear heat from the body really gently. Yeah, to me, I always think about flowers when it comes to like calming, getting back down to earth, getting back down. And it's interesting because it's such a light herb. Like flowers are very light, but they're helping to lighten our load. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It maybe clear some heat there. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think, the
Yep.
last, like, piece of practical advice, especially something we talked about recently, I think
Yep.
PC6 is, like, the perfect point for the year we're going to enter just because it is a very regulating, somewhat heat clearing, can kinda
Yep.
calm the nerves down and things like that. They even sell bands, guys, for, like, cruise ship bands that go over PC6. I think if you're ever feeling stressed, wearing one of those throughout the day, I've actually personally found relieving to my overarching stress. So I'm going to throw that one out there too. But I think we did a great job really recapping so many areas in which I think the fire horse is going to bring us. And I wanted to leave you with any last words. Is there anything else you can think of there? If not, I think that that's all I had.
Well, thank you everyone so much. My last note here is to listen to your heart. Follow your heart. I think that's what's being activated this year and to also create the systems for yin. I'm sure many of us prioritize, myself included, prioritize all the business meetings and all of the things that we have, but how often do we actually schedule in our rest and our creative time, our self pleasure, all of those things? I think all of those things are really, really important. So that's my last note.
No, no, I love that. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next video.